Okay, so it says recording in progress.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Fabricio Muriana, for joining me this afternoon. I always love talking to you, and today I'm really excited to talk to you for this Danone materiality assessment. So thanks for joining me.
I am the one to thank you. And if you can, if it's too noisy or you don't listen well, just let me know. I'm not going to hold it, but you just let me know if I need to hold it like closer in case.
Perfect. That sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty good, I think, but I'll let you know if it
Thank
falls.
you. Thank you so much, Lorraine. It's always delicious to talk to you in several types of conversations. And specifically in this project, I have been watching from everything that you're posting, and it's a pleasure to be here as an invited person from the food system. But I'm not quite sure if I am exactly a person from the food system, but I'm trying to be somehow for a couple of years. So thank you for this recognition too.
Excellent. Well, I have a feeling, regardless of what system you're from, your perspective will be really valuable. So, before we go further, actually, it'd be great for you to just introduce yourself in whatever terms you'd like, just to let people know who might be listening or reading this after the fact, what you do in whatever context you'd like to share.
Okay, that's always a question hard to answer, not only like to anyone asking, but I always wonder how to explain that to my mother, because everything that I have been doing for the past, I don't know, 10 years, it's not exactly any type of job or profession that used to exist in her time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always hard to show what is needed to be done now. Well, I have worked for 7 years in the communication market here in Brazil. I used to work with digital projects, ended up working with state digital projects, especially the presidential and national portals for digital services. Then I stopped and took a year off, a sabbatical year with a bike trip for 5 countries. And that changed a lot what I wanted to do with the time of my life. So when I came back, I first started working on projects devoted to urban issues, especially by that time, gentrification. By now, I think I would name another way, but it was called gentrification architecture. And then it started to be important to me to understand why do people participate in participation institutions, which means something that we have created in our constitution in 1988. So I developed a master's degree in that, investigating that issue. And that opened way for me to understand a little bit better what is the role of civil society. And then I kind of took part in one of these initiatives from the civil society, a very uncommon one, which was, I mean, the form was of a cooperative, but we were actually an association devoted to reselling agroecological and organic food in the center of São Paulo, with some perspectives, different perspectives on the idea of transparency. So we would show how much the producer gets for the food you're buying, and also how much it costs for the operation and everything to be set and working there. And I was a co-founder of this association co-op called Instituto Feira Livre, and I stayed there until December 2020. And that's when I started working on this new institution that I've been working so far. It's called Instituto Regenera, and we are devoted to something a little bit before the act of commercialization of reselling, which means how do you make more producers be able to sell in the cities, or to some of them, how do they sell more to the cities? How do they have more perspective on their production? and focusing on agroecological producers. I'm sorry for this noise. I think I have a visit right now, but luckily I won't have to check it. So it's just a little bit of invasion.
No
And
worries. Do you need to pause? I can
no,
pause
no,
if you
no,
you're good.
it's fine.
Okay.
And then up until now, we have been working on a project in the Amazon area, developing more conditions for the food produced in the biome to be consumed in the biome, which seems quite reasonable, but you know, our food systems are not reasonable at all. So we know in the city that we work on that 80% of the food comes from out of the state, which means that it comes from out of the biome most probably. And we want to create more conditions for this reality to change, for this way of, you know, food consumption be different in there. So that's what I'm dedicated right now. And well, I think that's a brutal summarizing.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I also like to ask my interviewees if they have any commercial relationship with the company we're talking about. So in this case with Danone, do you have any current or past commercial relationship that you want us to be aware of?
Apart from buying some of their products a couple of decades ago, not very intentionally. By that time, I think my mother used to do that. But yeah, I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
I think you're going to ask about Danone, so I can talk a little bit later of the impressions, but I don't have any connections.
Okay, great. And I also like to disclose how I come to be connected with the people that I'm talking to. And it's kind of fun for me to think about, well, how are we connected? So I'm going to connect a few dots that the 2 or 3 people who might be actually listening and watching these conversations might remember the very first interview I had for the very first assessment I did on Google was with a lovely woman named Juliana Lopez, who is a dear friend of mine and a dear friend of yours. And she was the brilliant wizard who said, I think you two should meet, when I was on a trip to Sao Paulo for work back in, I believe, 2018. And at that time, I met you as a grocer. You were one of the owners and founders of Instituto Feira Libre, and I sort of followed you around and listened and learned about what went on in this very innovative grocery store situation. And then since then, we've been able to be friends and collaborate and keep in touch. And I also want to connect another dot that's very relevant to this conversation, which is that you were I'd say the main connector and facilitator of the second in the series of 3 conversations around decolonizing regenerative agriculture. And I can make sure that there are links to that information and those videos in the notes for this video and the transcript, because I think you've been providing the world with access to some really interesting knowledge around food systems. So there's lots more I could say about how we're connected, but let's just say we're friends and collaborators, and I'm honored and delighted. And with that, I'm going to steer us into the interview questions that I've prepared.
Fortunately, I will have to add some information in there, since Instituto Regenera was created in a joint venture or something like that. Well, you presented Paulo Branco by that time, and this project that we are developing there in the Amazon area is connected to this fact. So I not only thank for that, but also I think that's part of the context too.
That's great. Yeah, and I've been meaning to circle back. We're going to get Paulo Branco in here too for a conversation, but maybe we'll spare him a little longer. All to say, we've got lots to connect on, and I'm super grateful. And I'm going to be looking off screen a little as I consult my questions and get us set up to dive into Danone and how we understand them, how you understand them as a company. Just before we go into the specifics of that company, I always find it really helpful to hear what individuals, what stakeholders that I'm interviewing actually think about the future. So let me set this one up a little bit, because as you know, we talk a lot about sustainable development, regeneration, regenerative agriculture. There's all kinds of words and terms that get thrown around, but I find it much more helpful to hear in your own words, what does the future you want look like? How would you describe it?
well, words are tricky, right?
Mhm.
That's something that um, uh, that is a context to say that I might be doubtful about what I'm saying right now, but I think most of things are upside down. I mean, I see food systems, for instance, as working with premises that are way disconnected to what we have to do right now in case we want to exist as human beings, or we want our future generations to exist. So somehow we have to review mostly everything. I mean, not everything, because the exception or what we work with, that is, the way people used to eat a couple of decades ago, or the way we produce food a couple of centuries up from now. We just have to look back and check what was being done, and maybe use it a little bit harder than what we are doing, and take it as important ancestral information. But somehow we also have to develop a lot. I mean, we have been producing food in a very different scale from the last century up until now, and it seems that we have to keep this scale in a very different way of production. So it's a great challenge somehow, but at the same time, it's something that we are kind of forced to do right now. It's not a choice anymore. It's not something that we are trying to decide what to do. We kind of know a little bit of what to do, but we still didn't figure out the details on that. And especially, we are trying not to consider that as a principle. I see Johnny on your back. Do you see it?
Joni's joined us. She'll be chiming in a moment. She needs to give some further thought to the future she wants.
Yeah, but if I could summarize, I would say that most things are upside down in what we have to do in the future. So I think I might have mentioned you in any conversation before that I used to read a lot Brecht, Bertolt Brecht. I don't know how to name it in English very well, but it's a German author. And he had this practice of making everything unusual or anormal, like what could be a regular scene that you go to the theater and you see how it is being presented. You show the lights, you show the person who works for that to happen, you show the actors dressing themselves to go to the scene, and you make everything kind of explicit on what is not being shown. And I think, especially in the food systems, that makes a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
I love it, and I love the drawing on Brecht. And apologies for Joni chiming in. She has a few other things she wanted to talk about. This may continue.
She's busy. I see.
Yeah, she's got a lot going on. So I think what I'm hearing is that in that future, we have this, what is sometimes called radical transparency, where everything or almost everything is visible. So that is a really neat vision. And you have, of course, worked on making that a reality in the present. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to ask you to keep that future as a lens through which you look as we explore the other questions. And you can keep adding to that future and building on it as we go, but hold that thought around transparency and look through it, if you will, as we consider the following. So from here, I do want to zoom in on Danone, and we're going to start in a positive context. So as much as you can reflect on what you see as the positive impacts of Danone currently. And by positive impacts, I'm going to describe that as because they're contributing to that future you want. They're actually helping to create it. So where do you see, or do you see evidence, examples, possibilities from the company that actually contribute to that future you've described?
Well, I probably wouldn't have answered this way a couple of months ago, but I really understand that industry and companies, they play an important role on generating rent, jobs, and as social structures, they somehow they conform the way we think. I think we should consider that they are an important role. They have an important role in generating these institutions like rents, jobs, and meaning for life somehow. The problem is that I think that not only they have to do that, but they also have to consider what not necessarily everyone working in there and not necessarily everyone willing to have a rent from these businesses are considering, which means they are connected to the food chains worldwide. They are connected to the needs of population, which means, you know, people willing to consume food. So you have to figure out a way to be in this context in a more aligned way with the needs of the earth, one could say, or the nature, others could say, or respecting cycles that could be said this way too. I don't know in detail their industrial production, because I think some of the industrial production is made in a way that we can't actually access. Why do they do what they do in the way they do? But actually, I really think that most of global companies connected to the main brands known worldwide as the owners of the food systems. I'm talking about the majority of that. They have to look at these details. I mean, the earth cycles and what we have to do in the following years.
Mhm, mhm. And so do you see, and maybe just panning back a bit wider than Danone itself and looking at sort of the major global food players, do you see activities that you say this is they're doing this right, that is what we need more of? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't want to miss things that you see that actually are working well with those big players. Is there anything?
Well, I think it's more of a look of how do you play the devil's advocate, or but I could say that I come from a country where the food system is connected to a big political representative group, and that representative group isn't something that came out of the blue. It came from a lot of organization. So I'm talking about big landowners who produce big monoculture productions with big pesticides. They are big pesticides customers, and they are also connected to big machinery and to big supermarket chains. So I see Danone in this chain, which means they are connected to a enormous organization. And I must admire that. I want to have such organization in terms of earth cycles, in terms of what we really need and not the needs of any of these individual companies and institutions. I want this organization. I want to understand how did they shape the way we consume, the way we are consuming right now. But we have to do it in a very different way, in a very steered in a totally different direction, you know. So I definitely would say that the organization that passes through Danone and they are part of in the international market of in the food systems, it's something that we have to study more, understand better, because you can't do that very easily. It was shaped through decades, lots of institutions, lots of work with a lot of people, but the results are not interesting in the country that in the earth that we are living right now.
Yep, I hear you. Okay, so let's go deeper down that trail then. Let's flip this around and look at where do you see these activities? You mentioned some of them, so like the monocropping pesticides, large machinery. Talk a bit more about what you see that isn't contributing to that future you want, that is potentially even undermining it or damaging it in some way. And if you can just give as much sort of specific examples of what is that activity, what's the problem that you see there?
Well, most of our local examples are somehow global in other ways, and my thoughts are very based on what I have seen here in Brazil so far. Brazil is a major food producer. It is an important player internationally, but it's turning from being a self-sufficient food producer to being a soy exporter for very specific markets. And so we are losing our food sovereignty somehow. And that is being shaped by policies, by landowners and their representatives. And that is being shaped not to care about the population situation, which means we now have more than 33 million people in my country only. I'm not talking about the earth. That is a hugely bad number for us, but and for the planet, it wouldn't be less bad. Of 33 million people, which can be in starvation or at risk of starvation in a country that is known as a food producer and a very important player in this role. So when you check such a situation, I mean, there is something very wrong. I mean, why there are systems working which don't provide for at least minimally check on this situation and check if the access to food is happening to most of population, because for sure you can develop a lot of products which not necessarily everyone needs, but you have to fulfill the needs of basic needs of everyone for them to have a possibility to live, to access other things, and to have dignity. So I really think that is something that attracts a lot my attention, by my point of view, very wrong. And well, in the last 4 years, we have been seeing this number grow and grow. And I'm very happy to check on what's the role of the food systems in there. I mean, what can we do in this situation? I'm only talking about starvation, which is something that happens now, will happen next week, has been happening for 20 years, and we simply don't have a solution. But if we talk about the environmental issues or with the needs of the population who work in this food production, we still have a lot more. I think I want to focus on the starvation problem because I mean it's a disaster and we see it every day, and somehow it's normalized. The other things are not that much viewable, but if you live in a big city here in Brazil right now, it's impossible not to view this issue right now. So yeah, I would name it.
Yeah. And what about some of the other impacts that are less visible, that maybe you don't see as a regular citizen of a large city, but that you know, as somebody who's gone behind the scenes in food systems, you've seen some things up close? What are some of the other impacts that concern you?
Well, one of the things that I could name in this transition to being a soy exporter, most of the population don't see how we export water. So, for instance, we have, it's already shown that we export more than 1 trillion gallons of water every day with the soy production, because for you to produce the soy, you have to have water. Right. So we are actually water exporters right now somehow. And agribusiness here in Brazil is responsible for the usage of clean water in more than 70% of, so it's not a city issue, actually. It is something that we are actually fomenting with public money, with our taxes, with policies for exporting water in very low and getting very few money for that. And apart from that, we are exporting some of the qualities of our soil in a very concentrated way of producing rent, normally that goes outside the country. So it makes no sense in terms of a country, in terms of the public interest. It makes no sense, and it's not viewable because we don't see water as something that has a value, but we are probably going to have wars on water in a couple of years. So we have to talk about this issue. And we could have a type of agriculture that not only doesn't export this water, but generates water. So we know by fact right now that the way you produce food or the way you produce forests generates water. So we have to address that. We have the technologies already, but we don't see that as something that is as urgent as it is.
Yeah, that's another big one. At the risk of depressing ourselves right out of the frame, before we move on to the next question, are there other things that you think are out of view that are problem impacts based on this current food system? And I know there's a lot. So the starvation is a big one. Water exporting is a big one. Are there other ones you want to make sure we've got on the radar?
How many hours we have?
Yeah, maybe just pick one or two. I just know you're such a font of awareness on what's really going on. So
I think the way we use pesticides and chemical, I don't know the name in English, what you use for the food to grow. So pesticides and chemical stimulants for the plants. Fertilizers. Yeah. The way we use it is absolutely irresponsible. I mean, I think the last thing that I heard of, which is tremendously scary, so if you go to the Guianas, so I'm talking about French Guiana, in the north of South America, I don't know how, but we have kind of a French territory in South America. But anyway, if you go there, people can't use crops that are based on roots because they have presented a type of pesticide, in that they have used a type of pesticide that condemned the soil for 500 years. So Brazil has been allowing pesticides in a absolutely industrial crazy way in the last 4 years. We have allowed more than 1,000 pesticides to be tested and used in Brazil. So it's extremely irresponsible to the future, not only to the present, because we would have to test them all for more than decades for you to see the types of we can't even test them right now because we don't know all of the types that are in the soil. So it's absolutely irresponsible in the way we are shaping the future. I mean, that could be something that I name as terrible too. But as that, I really think we have more than 10 or 20 terrible issues connected to the way we produce and consume our food. So yeah, I would name this one.
All right. Knowing that we probably could spend many, many hours, and don't hold back if more come up, I'm going to move us into another exercise and we'll just keep things flowing. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Just give me a moment here to get things set up. And tell me if you see a slide. Oh, come on now. That has your name on it. No.
I actually see a web page right now.
Yeah, hang on. It was being a little strange. Let me try that again. Okay, let's see if that'll work. There.
Yes, I see that. -5, +5.
Excellent. I like how you went right to the -5. This is good. So I'm going to explain what you're looking at here. And this is a knowingly foolish exercise. Okay, so just bear with me as we accept the ridiculousness of what we're about to do. I'm going to ask you to consider how and if you see, based on what you know now, the company Danone contributing to or undermining the future you want. And in particular, we're going to look at two dimensions. So the vertical dimension is with regard to ecosystem health. Everything above the line would be contributing to the health of the ecosystem. Anything below the line would be undermining or damaging the health of the ecosystem. And on the horizontal axis, we're looking at the health of society, of people and communities. And anything to the left of the line would be undermining the health of communities and people. Anything to the right would be contributing to our health and well-being towards that future you described. So recognizing this is a very blunt instrument for very nuanced, interconnected, dynamic things, I'm nonetheless going to ask you to tell me where you think I should put the company Danone and why.
Well, I have no reasons to believe that Danone is working on something that has a good impact on ecosystem health. So I am going to put it certainly on the bottom part of the graphic, and on the impact of social health on social health. I mean, it's hard to define standards, you know. Somehow when you play a role of making sense for people's lives in any type of system, you know, it is important somehow. But I really think that as you don't show any improvement on ecosystem and health, I really think that the possibility you're giving to people is a poorer one somehow. So I wouldn't put that low as the ecosystem health impact, but I would put it below 0, more or less where it is.
Okay, so, and does this feel low enough for the environmental piece, or does it want to be lower or higher?
No, I think it's fine. Yeah,
okay.
It's close to the abyss.
Just on the edge of oblivion.
Exactly.
Excellent. Whereas there's a glimmer of hope for society. Okay, cool. And that's thanks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Of course, I know you know this, but the logic of this is not to give an exact scientific diagnosis, but more just to hear your reasoning. You know, why do you put it there, and what comes up? So that's really helpful to hear your thinking. We're going to move into a couple scenarios now. These are a little more cheerful. And this is an opportunity for you to share what you might like to see happening going forward. So in this first scenario, I've actually just received a headline. I got, you know me, I don't read the news much, but some news got through. And the headline is that you have been made in charge of the whole universe. There's nothing in the way. There are no barriers. Anything you decide is what happens. So with that in mind, what changes would you like to make to this company?
Good. I really love to be like in this position of the ruler of the world. It's I try it every day with my cat, but it doesn't work very well.
You need a dog.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I would change in the way these companies operate is what they are willing to achieve, because the value they are producing is somehow connected to social political values. It's aligned with a time, but this time also created a context in which we are bringing the the planet to a shipwreck somehow. I really think that you have to change the core values somehow, what you want to achieve. I mean, do you want people to be nourished by what you're producing? You are in the food system. You want people to be um, better with a better nutrition about after buying your product, and if you get a bigger view on nutrition, it's like everyone producing what you're reselling is having a better nutrition on working in your food chain. So if that is the 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 core business somehow, if that is the aim in the beginning and not uh, shareholder profits, or how do you concentrate more rent in the place where you are, where you belong somehow, where you started, which is something that affects us a lot. Or if your system is not based on the concentration of power in a very small group connected to this whole chain that I mentioned before, from the pesticides to the land to the machinery to the supermarkets and so on. If it's not based on these ideals, most probably you would have a beneficial company what to the time that we live, to the situation we have in the earth, and to the nature cycles. So I would change the core values somehow. What do you want with this company? Because as far as I know about Danone, they are not more worried with the nutrition of the people consuming and producing their food, more than shareholder profits and any other institutions of late capitalism that we have so far.
I love it. Unfortunately, that was fake news and the headline wasn't true. So it's back to you doing your best with your cat. But I did just get another headline, which I think is almost as good, which is that the co-CEOs of Danone, and I, by the way, this seems to be shifting, but when I was developing the script, the co-CEOs were Veronique Pensionati Bossetta and Shane Grant, because the former CEO, Emmanuel Faber, and we could chat more about what happened there, is no longer there. So they have these two co-CEOs. In any case, they take your call. When you speak, they want to know what you have to say. The thing is, they're pretty busy, even though there's two of them. They've got a lot on the go. So they have very little time. They still want to know what you think. You have 30 seconds with them in a call. What do you tell them, the leaders of this company?
I got a couple of examples of good farmers that you should take a look. I mean, maybe what they are doing is more centered on what we need right now than the ones you're working with or the suppliers you have. I really think that good examples help a lot in the changes that we are needing right now. So I would show some people there in Vale do Ribeira and some people producing in Bahia, agroecological farmers specifically.
I'm hoping they hear your call. Alas, that scenario was also a bit of fiction, but this will be public, so who knows what they'll hear. And that was the last of the prepared questions that I had for you, other than to ask, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you would like to share with regard to Danone, the future you want, and food systems? Anything else to put on the table?
I really think that any way to open this discussion is necessary, but we are really going to need those who are hearing. And there are not many, unfortunately, up until now. Maybe we will have to generate a better context, because screaming is not exactly a good way of trying to change ways of thinking, change modes of living, and so on. So we have to have better context. So opening way for the hearing of people and trying to find those who really can hear, which means communication, dialoguing, and not imposing or anything like that. I really think that these changes, they demand more communication than less. So we have to search for those who are hearing in any context that we think about systemic changes on the food systems.
I love it. That leads me to one quick follow-up question, which is, what does it look like when they're hearing? How do you know when a person can hear?
Well, it's not that easy right now to see anyone coming differently from a conversation, but conversations are starters, and when you come different from any experience, you notice word changes, habit changes, and even incorporation of what other people are saying. So I know words are tricky, so words are not enough. Actions are way more important. But I really think that between words and actions, we can see when someone is hearing or not. And I wouldn't put all the coins in any of them, but we have both. We have the need for both.
I love it. Thank you very much for your time, your insights, your experience. Really, really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Fabrizio. Thank you.
That was fast. Thank you too. I really thought we would have to use a couple of hours talking about the food systems, and we know that we could be here for hours. And
well, I'll stop the recording, then we get hours.
okay, but thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.